Hello, hello, and welcome back to Read Beckett. It has been another week, so let's catch up on all the books that I read this week, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading. Diving in quickly with one I can't talk too much about because this is my first BookTube Prize book, The Song of the Cell by Siddhartha Mukherjee. And this is a science nonfiction. I am judging in the nonfiction category for the BookTube Prize. It is all about the cell, as it says. We get a very detailed explanation of the cell. We talk through different types of cells, the human manipulation of cells, the sort of history of different facets of that, the science surrounding it, and we also talk about cell therapies and treatments for diseases through this book. So that's about all I can tell you in terms of synopsis. Generally, I can't give my thoughts until the beginning of August when the round wraps up. The next book that I read is Ocean's Echo by Everina Maxwell. That is kind of a companion novel with Winter's Orbit, Everina's debut novel. There was no real overlap, though. There's some pretty significant differences. There are similarities in stylistic choices and the balance of the story, but nothing overlapped as far as I can tell, so you could totally jump in with this one. This is a really interesting balance of sci-fi romance with male protagonists and political science fiction. So it's got a good balance there, and that was present in Winter's Orbit as well, but I think this leans a little bit more toward the plot, and the romance is a very much lighter element. I don't think there was any steam to the romance even. So we're following two guys, Tennelheen and Surratt. And Tennel is sort of a loose cannon. It's almost the same dynamic as the previous book, where one of them is kind of rough around the edges and needs to straighten up, and the other one is a little bit tight-laced. And here, Tennelheen has been using the mental powers that exist in this world. That was not something that really showed up in Winter's Orbit. So that was something really new, built out entirely in this book as far as I can tell. And so everyone has these mental powers, or most people that we see in this book have mental powers. And so they're not supposed to use them in certain ways. So Tennelheen keeps getting himself in trouble with a high-powered relative of his because he's doing reckless things with his powers. And so, as a result, he's conscripted into the army. Not fun. And he's very unhappy about it, clearly. But as a part of this, because he's very strong in his mental powers, his conscription means that he's going to be sort of bonded to someone else with another type of mental powers. And that person is Surratt. And Surratt is the most honorable military guy. He is military through and through. He sort of loves his job. He doesn't want to be out there making a name for himself or getting accolades. He kind of likes doing the mundane, responsible work to keep things going. And he finds himself, though, also in trouble because he did the responsible thing rather than the thing that his superiors really wanted him to, kind of. So that puts them together. So I mean, that's really all you want to know about plot. There's a lot of political drama from things that they're involved with, and their relationship building out is a major part of this, but it's so slow moving that I do have to say that was kind of a drawback to me. In the first book, in Winter's Orbit, I thought the balance was a little bit closer to what I would want, where they're thrown together immediately, and that makes you attached to the characters very quickly because they're having to find their footing with each other. And in both cases, they don't really like each other, so they start off on the wrong foot. Here, we spend a lot of time getting to know them individually before they're actually thrown together into that situation. And that felt so slow to start and really slow to connect to the characters for me because we just don't see them interacting with each other, and we don't get the chance to root for their relationship right off the bat. It took 100 pages before we're even getting there. So that was very slow going. What we had on the kind of stronger side for this is those mental powers worked really well because the joining of the two of their mental powers involves a heavy discussion of consent. And because Surratt is very honorable, of course, we have them going back and forth about deciding what's right to do, and his not wanting to be behind this conscription into a forced mental situation that Tenelheen doesn't agree to. And so there's a really good duality to the consent of their relationship personally and their relationship in terms of their military job. So I loved that layered, nuanced way of dealing with the topic of consent. Really, really great. And I think once they did start getting going with their romantic relationship, I got behind them as a couple. They're, one of them is really abrupt and very proper, and the other one is a little loosey-goosey and a little bit more of a partier. And I think the way they play off of each other just fit perfectly. I do also think the world building was so interesting. I loved that, and I would love to see more of that. The concepts that were being explored there in terms of the world building and the political drama associated with the world building aspects was really cool. So I loved basically the last, I think, 150 pages. So compelling. But it basically was an uphill climb to get there, really. So this was all what's it called? Like a Sanders Lange, where Brandon Sanderson delivers everything all in one go at the end of the book. That's what this felt like. It was just a really slow climb to get to this massive rollout of this great delivery on what was built up to. So I think that was fabulous. For me, it was a fun book. I think it was overly long and very slow to start. I mean, this is a 450-page book, but I really think this was a solid book, and I enjoyed almost all of it. Then almost a kind of complete opposite type of book in every way, other than gays. There is definite gays in here. Unintentionally, I read double gay books. But this is Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kasulke, and this was great fun. I read it in 2 hours, so it was a nice, light, pacey, quick read, and mostly that is because it's all told in Slack conversations, which is like a chat application that's very commonly used at businesses. And we're following a character who has been sucked into Slack. And you can't really talk too much about it because it is so short, but he's trying to convince his coworkers that he actually has, and it's not a prank or a joke that he's playing on them. And things get increasingly very weird, unsettling slightly. It's just a little everything feels off and not right. But it's also super mundane because they're talking in Slack like they would if they were coworkers for the most part. People talking about projects they have to deal with. And you don't totally know what they do. I don't think at any point, it seems to be some type of marketing maybe. But they're talking about mundane projects and delivering on those. And he's getting really applauded for his delivery on work because he's doesn't have anything else to do. He's just stuck in Slack all the time. So that's all he can do. The sort of innovations he comes up with to get around the limitations of being inside Slack, that is all a problem. And as I said, there's a minor, very, very minor gay romance subplot. I will say, the writing, super innovative. Love that. It was very compulsively readable, very entertaining, even though it's so mundane. I think this is a book that is very of the moment and won't really continue on, but it's something that really raises a lot to talk about, definitely. There is one thing that I do have to call out that's a major spoiler, so I'm gonna put a spoiler warning here for you all. So there is something that happens in here later on in the book that is something that rationally, logically, I really dislike, and have major problems with. But in the context of this book, I'm willing to overlook it. I mean, there's a certain point where you have to be willing to say, okay, yeah, a lot of stuff that's happening here is just absurd, and we're gonna go with it because of the effect that the author is going for. So I'm willing to just slide past it in terms of reading this. But I think for many other people, that's not going to be possible. And that for me is the fact that one of the coworkers basically has to start taking care of this guy's body because he's been stuck in Slack and his body is just sitting there frozen basically in his chair at home. And so he has asked this coworker to go check on his body. And over the time that this is happening, this coworker is showing up taking care of the body. Eventually he moves the body into his apartment to make it easier for himself. And so you see that play out in absurd and funny ways. But at one point things progress along, and I don't want to spoil sort of what happens, but his body sort of becomes animated. And as part of that, they have sex. And the guy that's taking care of the body is aware that it's not him in the body, right? He's aware that it's not consensual, basically. So for me, this is almost a caregiver rape situation. It's not graphic, it's not on page. The conversation happens in Slack of him making this guy aware that he's had sex with his body in Slack after the fact. And that is used as a meet cute, effectively, to come out, to talk about their feelings for each other that they've developed over this weird experience. And I think that for people that are willing to engage with really problematic and difficult topics like that, I think you can have some really interesting conversations out of that about this sort of thing. But for me, I think a lot of people are going to see that and immediately recoil. So I definitely do have to kind of underline that aspect of the book as something that's not going to be acceptable or palatable to all readers, not something that they can look at within the absurd context of the book and get something out of. So just highlighting that. I think overall, as a whole, I really enjoyed the book, and it was a quick read, super compelling, and had a lot to say about work culture, about our interactions with coworkers, and just generally interpersonal interactions. The weird things that happen were very innovative and fresh to me. So I think this was a fresh, timely book that creates a lot of conversation pieces. Then we're on to the books that I didn't finish this week. We have Letters to a Young Muslim by Omar Gobash. I said I was going to finish this last week and I didn't. I read a couple of essays. I think I only have one or two left of like 15 pages probably. I just didn't want to force myself to pick it up when I wasn't really wanting to push through and finish it. But I will finish this within the next week, I'm sure. So that one is going. This one, A Slice of Mars by Guerric. I pretty much just want to be reading this all the time. I'm keeping myself pretty limited to weekday evenings so that I can focus on my BookTube prize reading, but I'm 300 pages into it, which is just shy of halfway, so that's made good progress. Byzantium by Stephen R. Lawhead. Still progressing very slowly on that one, but we're good. I'm almost a third of the way. Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. I started my second BookTube prize, Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien. And last one, Terraformers by Annalee Newitz. I actually started on audio, just barely. So that is the currently reading stack that is trying to fall. So we're in progress with many, many things, but it's going great. So reading has been good. Life has been a little more stressfully. Trying really hard not to be angry this week about things that went down work-wise. And then also had a lot of canceled plans stuff because of things that were going on with other people in my life that didn't really directly impact me, but meant like things work-wise as well were impacted by that. And that was not a reason for my anger. That was just people being dumb. Anyway, so not really a lot to talk about life-wise. I do want to talk about weather. I feel like I've talked about weather a lot in recent weeks. I have talked about how it's hot. It's supposed to be about 100 today, which is typical. Like, the heat is normal. However, this is the weirdest summer I've ever experienced here, because normally we have humidity, like very high humidity here, and we don't have humidity this summer. It's been a month and a half into the summer, and it's just not gotten humid, which leads to a very strange, for everyone who lives here, strange outcome, and that is that it actually cools down overnight. So mornings and evenings are so nice, and yet that is something that none of us can comprehend about what's going on. It's not supposed to be like that, right? So usually when the humidity is there, your temperature drop overnight is almost non-existent. It stays hot all the time. Now, like, my AC hardly comes on at night because it's down to the actual temperature that I want it to be. And like significant major drop, like in Fahrenheit, like 30-degree temperature drops, which never happens. Like, you just don't see that. If you see that kind of temperature drop, it's because there's going to be a massive, like, cold and hot front leading to a tornado or thunderstorm, or, you know, whatever massive storms are going to happen. That's the only time you ever see that here. And yet it's been consistently that way the whole summer so far. So strange, so strange. So I don't know what the phenomenon is for that. If somebody knows what is going on with that from a meteorological standpoint, I would be really curious, because it's never been like this the entire time I've lived here. I've lived here over 20 years and it's never been like this. So anyway, I think that's it for my week. I don't want to talk to you about all the stress stuff. So in terms of recommendations, I wish I had written them down. I totally forgot. I think number one is there was an event with Martha Wells. And again, it was Ann Leckie actually ended up being the person who was kind of interviewing her. So I shared the interview with her about her new book a couple weeks ago, and this time around it was kind of same place, same location, same bookstore hosting it at the library actually. And really fantastic sci-fi authors, or sci-fi and fantasy authors. Martha Wells is promoting her new fantasy book, so she's on tour for that, for The Witch King. And yeah, so definitely check out that video. And the other one is actually a booktube video from Tori Talks, discussing how to honestly review books and kind of not be inflammatory, and a lot about what to do with tone in reviewing books, and the differences in how you can come across based on your tone. So that was a great one for booktubers, for people who like reviewing, or if you just have an interest in the topic of review and how people form their reviews. I really enjoyed that. Very thoughtful video. So I think that's it for me this week. Hopefully this is not a super long one, but we will see. I'm looking forward to going to return these books at the library and go pick up some more. So that is it for me today. Thank you so very much for watching.